We could see two more summits between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. The Russian president has extended an invitation. Mr. President, President Trump, come to Moscow. And the White House says the president is open to going if he gets a formal invitation. President Trump has, I should say, President Putin has said he's ready to visit Washington under appropriate conditions. The White House originally suggested a meeting in the fall, then said it should happen when the investigation is done, the Russia investigation, or as President Trump called it, the witch hunt, sometime next year. Let's turn to the Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace. He interviewed President Putin at the summit in Helsinki and has a lot coming up, including a live interview with President Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. That's this Sunday. Off to Moscow we go. What do you say?
Здравствуйте, как ты поживаешь? That's a little bit of Russian
for you.
that I have learned. I'm up for another trip. I just came back from Moscow, and I would love to go back and maybe even sit down with President Putin. I will tell you that one of the things I've learned is that originally President Trump wanted the first meeting with President Putin to be in Washington, and Putin pushed back and basically said, look, you guys have sanctioned my country and me up to our eyeballs. We can't have the first summit in your background. So that's why they ended up having it in Helsinki. But after that, it was always anticipated as part of the conversation there would be reciprocal summits, one in Washington, which would be the first one sometime next spring, and then a follow-on in Moscow later. And that isn't so unusual. That's the way Reagan and Gorbachev did it back in the 80s.
What sort of reaction is this getting around town there?
Well, look, there's a conflict about this. Nobody is upset with the idea that President Trump and President Putin are meeting. There are a lot of issues to discuss. There are a lot of differences to try to resolve. So in that sense, there's no distress about it at all. Obviously, there was a lot of distress about the way President Trump handled the news conference after his summit with President Putin, and so that adds to a little bit of concern about what would happen in future summits.
There was a lot of concern after that summit. We heard a lot of people saying, oh, there'll be resignations. People who care about the country will stand up to him, and people. I didn't see a thing happen.
No, and look, you can argue a lot of aspects of this. On the other hand, I have talked to at least one official who was very deeply involved in the summit and who was getting a lot of calls to resign. And he said, look, I'm doing good work for the country. I think I'm helping to protect the country. Why would I resign? Well, how would, in any way, would that help, either in terms of the conduct of foreign policy or our relations with Russia? I will tell you there is a sense among some American officials that the meeting between President Trump and President Putin went off very much as planned and was a productive meeting, both the one-on-one meeting and also the bilateral meeting. It was the news conference that this particular official said went off the tracks when President Trump, in effect, equated the claims of the U.S. intelligence community that Putin had meddled in the 2016 election with Putin's denials that they hadn't meddled. But he said up till that point, and obviously that was a public relations disaster, he said the actual substance of the summit was very productive.
Giuliani this weekend. What's the plan there?
Well,
it's been a roller coaster, Let's be straight about it.
Let me also say we're going to have an exclusive interview that we've just locked down with Steven Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, and there's a lot to talk to him about. First of all, these very strong GDP numbers, 4.1%, and the big question there, is it sustainable? Is it a one-off? Is it a blip? Or is it a sign of better things to come? Also, obviously, the trade war and this deal, how big a deal is it with the European Union? As far as Giuliani is concerned, you put your finger on it at the top of the show. I mean, you've got this extraordinary face-off now between Donald Trump and the man who used to be his personal lawyer, used to be his personal fixer, who appears, as the federal government has squeezed him over a separate investigation, to have decided to flip to try to save his own skin by providing what information he can about Donald Trump. And one assumes that as his personal lawyer and fixer, potentially he could have pretty damaging information. On the other hand, for instance, this disclosure that he says that President Trump knew about the Russia-Trump Tower meeting back in 2016 when it took place, First, one, we're told that he doesn't have any proof of it. It's going to be his word against the president. So, you can say that's worth what it's worth. And in addition, I'm not sure if the president did know about it, that it's really damaging to him politically. It could be damaging to Donald Jr. because he testified under oath before the Senate Judiciary Committee. I'm not sure it's particularly damaging to Donald Trump. Did he potentially lie to the New York Times? Yeah, but the last time I checked, well, that's not something to be praised or admired. It's not illegal either.
Nope, not a crime to lie to the Times. Hey, hope you have a great weekend. We'll be watching.
You bet. Thank you, Shep.
All right.